Welcome to The Traveling Image. I am Tony Cece, and today I want to talk with you about all the things I did wrong when I captured this photograph. Normally, we as photographers try to only put our best foot forward, and I'm trying to, with my blog, break the norm of that and point out some of the mistakes that I make, as well as the things that went well. Because, after all, it's all about learning and learning from each other. And so this image, while I have it up here right now, it looks all right. And I'm pretty happy with it, and that I was able to save it. And I emphasize the word save. This picture of Savineau was taken in Haiti, just outside of the St. Marc region. And I was with Operation Blessing, and we were there distributing hygiene kits to school children. And the team from Haiti was checking on all of the water purification systems that we had installed there 3 years ago during the height of the cholera epidemic or outbreak. And I happened to be in Haiti working with a group called Rain Catchers when cholera broke out. I was in the south, and I got a call from my boss at Operation Blessing, and she said, "Can you join the Operation Blessing team as they head into the thick of where the cholera outbreak started?" And I said yes, and changed all of my flight plans and met up with them, and we came right through here. And right behind him on the right here is a canal, and that canal connects to the Artibonite River, which is where the cholera started. And so all up and down these villages along this canal and many other canals, people were getting sick and dying from cholera. And so we went in with clean water solutions at that time, and medical teams. And I mean, it was one of the craziest things that I've ever seen or been a part of. People were mourning. People were rejoicing when they were receiving clean water. It was all kinds of emotion. So back to this image. I wanted to give a little backstory because that's how I met Savineau. And he was strolling through on his horse as we were looking at the units. And he stopped and let me take his photograph and, told us about where he lived in this area and the blessing that the water has been to him. So the failures of this image, let's get into it. This is the original photograph, and it's pretty awful. It's overexposed. He's in the shade. There's a lot of sun, bright sun behind him. Even along right here, the sun is hitting. And if I could have just gotten him into that sunlight, it would have been a totally different image. But let's talk about a couple of things. Partly that I was just without a lot of time. He strolled into town, tried to get his horse to give me a pose, wasn't working, and then I realized that I was battling. If I did get him in the sun, I was going to be a big shadow on the side of his horse, and I wasn't prepared to shoot otherwise. So what I did do is I grabbed this beautiful portrait of him. Very happy with how this turned out. Lots of things went right for this, but I really wanted to get a final shot of him with his horse because this isn't nearly as interesting to me. I still like it. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of intrigue in his eyes. I love this shadow going across from his hat. The hat's just a neat texture. The lines of these tall grasses kind of coming into his face and then fading behind him. I like a lot about how this works. But again, the intrigue for me was him on the horse. He was like this Haitian cowboy that had come strolling in, and I wanted to capture that. And so after I talked to him, he was getting ready to leave, and I tried to grab just a couple more shots before he turned and went away. And I got this one, which is exposed all right, but on my camera LCD and the histogram, I just was seeing how dark everything was, and I overcompensated, and that left me with this bright image. But thankfully, if I'm shooting raw, Lightroom can pull back so much. I'm looking at this and thinking, oh my goodness, everything's blown out. The sky is gone. But if you actually look at the image here, at this histogram, if I start rolling over, if you look at these numbers here, you'll see they're 99%, 99.6, 99.9. That means that there's still a little bit of detail. They're not 100% blown out, even though this clipping line here is pretty scary to look at. So just by pulling back the highlights and the whites, I can start to get a completely different picture. So what I did was I really just started going to town on this image with the curves and trying to pull back as much as I could in order to re-expose this image in Lightroom. And one of the things, this is not a Lightroom tutorial or how to. I just wanted to point out a few things that as you do save images to look out for. Mainly this, when you really start to use that highlights or the shadows and pull and try and pull and push your image back to proper exposure or to lighten things, you start to get this purple halo around the outsides of images, and that's something to look out for. And you can come in with the paintbrush and paint away some of your highlight saves and things like that to get it back to normal. And that's what I had to do in here, and I was just quickly doing this pulling. I wouldn't have probably done the highlights and shadows exactly like I had, but I was able to avoid most of that halo and that purple fringe that I got on the outside of the image, and got it to a point where I'm fairly happy with it, especially if I put it side by side with his portrait. The portrait's really going to be what's going to draw you into his face and his character, and that's amplified when you see him on his horse and you see his posture and the way that he's sitting. But there's another thing, even if I had gotten the previous image to this one perfectly and I had a fill flash and I nailed this shot, there's something about pose. And the pose here, I would have still tried to work with this failed image because the way that the horse's head is moved out, the lines in this work a lot better, revealing his posture and the way he's sitting holding on. And it's just a much more dynamic photo. So, and sometimes, I find that when I'm shooting, even if I'm doing things perfectly, I'll get one where my flash doesn't fire or something doesn't go right. And that particular photo a lot of times seems like it's got the best expression or the best movement, or it's just the most intriguing of the bunch. And it's always, do I try and save it or do I go with the second best? In this case, I didn't have a lot of other options to work with, so I decided to try and save this photo of Savineau. And I point this out to say, don't be discouraged when you don't always get it right. I was able to save this, even if I hadn't, I could have, if I had to do the fringing and all of that, I could have gone black and white, and then I would never see the purple cast on the outsides, and I would have still been happy with it. My goal is always to try and get it right in camera, right when I'm on location, because dealing with this in post just becomes a burden and a headache to do this level of fixing to an image. But I also want to just point out that you see stuff online all the time and you think, wow, how do they just always nail it? They always get it right. And you don't know necessarily, because we don't often let on how much we're trying to save an image in order to get it to a place where we would put it out there for people to look at. And that happened with this image, and I just wanted to be open and honest about it and say, I don't get it right every time. This isn't my normal workflow to try and save an image like this. But it does happen, and there are several photos that I put in I have a folder in iPhoto that I just call, Tony's Best, and I try and keep what I think are some of my best images readily available. They're in iPhoto, so I can sync them to my iPad. There's a good number of them where I have really had to save the image, because the way that the subject was interacting with me, or the movement, or whatever it is in it, made me want to try and save that image and turn it into something beautiful that communicates a story. And for me, that's what it's about. What does the image tell you? And this image, before it was fixed, didn't convey a whole lot. There was too much that got in the way, and I was just too distracted by how overexposed it was, and there was nothing that really drew you into the image. And here, it was able to be saved. So I just encourage you to go out, to make mistakes, and to press on. And when you have to make fixes in post-processing, I haven't really done anything except for treat the curves, the highlights, things like that. There's no, I didn't clone anything out or anything like that to this image. So that's kind of what I wanted to convey today, and let you know that we all make mistakes. We can't get it right, especially in environments like this where communication is a bit of a problem, having to work with translators. We were in a hurry to try and get back to Port-au-Prince. He was trying to get back to his village, and he just gave us about 5 minutes of his time, and most of that wasn't even spent photographing. So keep on learning, keep on shooting, and when you have to, use post-processing to enhance the images if you're struggling when you're out in the field and you're actually composing and taking the images.